Do you think that you are eating enough to be the best runner that you can be? I doubt it. Let's get into it. I came across an article in Trail Runner magazine, and that article is titled The Science of Low Energy Availability and Performance. And that article is based on a recent study that was published in the Scandinavian Journal of Medicine and Sports Science. And the study and the article are about low energy availability, or basically talking about the impacts of underfueling on sports performance. Oh, and this is also the weekly running and training vlog, where the main purpose of this video is for you to tell me about your week of running. I want to hear about your successes, and I definitely want to hear about those setbacks. Maybe you haven't been eating enough this week and it's been having an effect on your performance. If that's the case, or that has ever been the case, I want to hear about it in the comments. Okay, so this article is a little deep, and because it gets a little complex, I am of course going to link to it in the show notes below, but I'm also going to make this a pretty short video, and we're just going to go over some of the downsides of what happens when you don't fuel adequately. But ultimately, this whole thing about not fueling adequately it's a bit of a pickle. And it's a bit of a pickle because we're all starting from different places, and in a lot of cases, you and I have been conditioned to think that a certain type of body aesthetic is ideal. What is also less than ideal is that you are probably a runner, and endurance sports, along with other weight category division sports, up to a certain point, definitely benefit from having a certain body mass, and that body mass is usually a little lower, right? You and I, we're going out there, we're running for a long time. We don't need to be expending extra energy hauling more weight than we absolutely need to. And that's the pickle, because that's not necessarily true. And of course, we already know this. There have been a lot of professional runners that have talked about their time with calorie counting and cutting back calories and how their performance suffered. And then when they put on a few pounds, their performance magically got better. And that can happen to all of us. But the problem with low energy availability is that it's not all bad all the time. Ultimately, it does get bad if you stay at it long enough, but there are some upsides in the short term. And because there are some upsides, sometimes some of us are a little more prone to magical thinking, and we think, yeah, maybe this is for me. When in reality, it comes down to lots of different variables that decide whether it works for you and me or not. And that's age, sex, type of sport, the macronutrient profile of the energy deficit. This last one I always hate to see, genetics. All of our genetics are different, and some of our genetics predisposes us to certain conditions. So we can't just say that because Billy Bob ate this amount of food, I am also going to eat this amount of food and expect the same results. It doesn't work that way. And yet we often find ourselves trying to emulate a person or a diet that we see that has been marketed to us that are going to guarantee results. Okay, so I already mentioned how we're all starting from a different position. And of course, if you are a little overweight and you need to lose weight because of a health condition, it definitely makes sense for you to cut calories, to have a low energy availability in order to get to a healthy weight so you can live your life, right? Health comes first. But let's say you're already a runner and you start seeing your times getting better as you lose weight. Now, you are obviously getting healthier, but your running times are also getting faster. So you think, if I lose a little more weight, then my times are going to keep getting better. And it isn't quite that simple. As I'm sure each of us intuitively knows, it isn't always that simple, and yet it can still be pretty tempting to fall into that trap. I have certainly fallen into that trap of thinking that a lighter weight means faster times, and it doesn't. For me, a lighter weight means injury, and injury being broken bones and whatnot. It's not pretty. So first of all, let's talk about the short-term impacts of having a low energy availability. And this short-term can be anywhere from a couple of days to a couple of weeks. And if you're a runner, I think this is one to pay attention to, because you can kind of nip it in the bud right away if you start noticing these things. But low skeletal muscle glycogen is associated with not adapting to your training. So let's say you go out and you've got intervals and you know that you have to hit these intervals at a certain pace. We're talking all else being equal. And then one week, all of a sudden you're not hitting these splits and you're more tired and you're not running as fast and something's just off, like you're not recovering. You're not hitting your workouts as you think you should. That's a pretty quick sign that you are suffering from low energy availability. And look, a lot of times it's an easy fix, right? Go home, eat a cheeseburger, you're gonna get that energy back in and all's good. You are immediately going to feel good. But we're talking about a continuing trend. And that's what I want you to avoid, and that's what I try to avoid. There have been studies that have shown that it only takes a few days to start showing markers of reduced bone formation, increased inflammation, worsened immune function, and reduced iron absorption. Now, here's the kicker. There are also studies that show that a short-term low energy availability, so a calorie deficit, has positive effects. So ultimately, I think that you have to pick your poison, but enough people have discovered that picking the wrong poison is going to lead to long-term damage, and that's what we want to avoid. Okay, so those are the short-term impacts. I just briefly want to talk about the positive impacts of low energy availability, because I think that is kind of the insidious trap that we are prone to fall into as runners, as people that are trying to do something a little better. we're trying to find that magic pill. And the authors of the study do admit that moderate and short-term low energy availability can possibly affect some body functions. And those things are specifically skeletal muscle and our neurons. But here's the thing, if you stick to that too long, there are other parts of our body that start to decline. And we're talking bone health and iron metabolism. That's why, at least in my case, when I dropped a little bit of weight where I didn't think I was healthy, but at the time I thought I was very healthy, I started experiencing more stress fractures. So you do have to balance it. There is that tightrope that I don't think it is worth any of us trying to toe. Because although you may eke out a few more seconds in whatever event that you are trying to do, because if you fall off the other side, we're talking about a potential bone injury that could stop you from doing the sport that you love for a long time. But again, we're all individual and it's very difficult to actually put a focus on an exact number. Like, this is what I need to take in order to be healthy and not have low energy availability. There are so many variables, it's impossible for me to tell you and to give you an actual number. So in a nutshell, I just need you to eat enough. How's that? So the medium-term impacts of a low energy availability are sometimes tricky to see because we can overcome them by, like I said, going home and eating a cheeseburger and feeling better, all right? But that's a short-term solution to a long-term problem. Because if you continue to operate on a low energy availability, studies have shown that you are going to be putting out less power, you're going to have less strength, and your responses to training are going to be blunted. You're not going to be getting the same benefit out of doing the workouts that you would if you were adequately fueled. I feel like this is kind of obvious, but it's still something that we need to be told, because there are people out there that are thinking, oh, I need to just cut all calories in order to drop weight and then I'll be better. It's a dodgy mindset to get stuck in. So long-term low energy availability it gets a little tricky because it's very difficult to study, because obviously for ethical reasons, studies can't put people in that position where they're going to have long-term negative effects. I mean, even if they didn't have ethical limitations, it would be very difficult to get someone to sign up for a study like that. But I suppose if you don't have ethical limitations, you could just trick people into doing your study. And the long-term downsides of low energy availability comes from studying RED-S. And as you know, RED-S is relative energy deficiency in sport. I have done a video on RED-S, so if you're interested, go back and look for that one. And ultimately, the long-term effects of low energy availability are everything we've already talked about. So you're not going to be training as well. You're not going to feel like you have energy because you really don't. You're going to have lower iron, lower red blood cell levels. You're going to be more prone to injury, but also there's going to be illness, mood, cognitive impairments that come from not getting enough energy. So basically, if you don't eat enough and you continue with your training, you are ultimately going to be messing up your entire life. How does that sound? My friends, you got to eat enough. I definitely want to hear from you about this. I want to know if you've ever, I don't know, got to a point where you realize that you need to take in more fuel when you're running or to fuel your training. And if you feel like talking about it, perhaps if you've gone through something where you've had low energy availability and you've seen some of these impacts that we've talked about in this video, I would really love to hear about it. I'd also love to hear about how much you actually eat in order to fuel your training. I know there are some days where it just feels like I am eating all the time. But of course, right now, as I'm making this video, I'm in the middle of a marathon training block, and generally that's how I feel going through every marathon training block. But I don't know. Anyway, had a pretty good week of running. Started off on Monday with 7.5 miles, super easy like I usually do on Monday, but I did throw in a couple of 30-second strides, and I did 7 in total. So 30 seconds picking up the pace and then 30 seconds recovery just at the end of my run, just to get those legs turning over, because Monday I was feeling a bit stale. And Tuesday was my first workout day of the week, and Tuesday I knocked out 8.5 miles total. But get this, I warmed up for 1 mile, and I usually warm up for 2 miles, but I didn't have enough time to do a 2-mile warm up like would be my preference. But I managed to just suck it up, and I did 1 mile to warm up, then I did 4 1.5 mile repeats with a 1/4 mile recovery in between, and then I cooled down for 1/2 mile and went to work. So these are getting some pretty long intervals because, you know, we're in marathon training and we can't do these short intervals all the time. I actually think next week I've got 2-mile intervals, so we'll see how that goes. Anyway, Wednesday was 10.1 miles, super easy. Again, bit of a slog on Wednesday. My perceived effort was definitely higher than my pace would suggest, but I am starting to feel that fatigue of marathon training, so I suppose that's normal. Won't be long now till I start getting those aches and pains that I always seem to get before a race. Hopefully I'll be able to just stuff those down back inside and just carry on and do what I need to do. Thursday was my long run of the week. I knocked out 20 miles. This is my last 20-mile run before Boston, so I was glad that I got it done. But again, it was a bit of a slog. And you may have saw this on Instagram, but I ran out of gels. I ordered some Morton gels and they weren't getting there until Friday, but Thursday was the only day I could do my long run, so I ended up taking a banana and I wore those flip belt shorts. So it was very easy to just tuck a banana into one of the pockets around the waistband. And it actually worked out pretty well. And then Friday was a day off. Super glad to take that day off. And then Saturday, because I did my long run on Thursday, when I usually do a tempo run, I knocked out my tempo run on Saturday. And that was 9 miles total, 1 mile to warm up, 7 miles at tempo, and then 1 mile to cool down. And then I wrapped up the week with 7 miles, pretty easy, but I did run over the golf cart overpass in a country club near my house, and I just went back and forth for a couple of miles, knocking that out 18 times, bringing my week's total to 60.17 miles, which is about 96.83 kilometers. So a pretty good week. Gotta say I'm pretty happy with the week overall, even though I wasn't feeling it for a few of the runs. And I do have some dodgy health issues, just the aches and pains that I was talking about. I'm not sure if that is something just a little deeper, but perhaps I'll talk about that in other videos. Or maybe I'll just ignore it, hope it goes away. Anyway, let me know about your week of running. Oh, hey, if you have made it to this point in the video, why don't you put the snail emoji in the comments just so I know you made it all the way to the end of the video. And with that, be kind, be happy, run well. I will see you in a couple of days.